I'm going to give quite a different presentation today, which is about the cruise guide and how the Marlborough District Council are using APIs and open data to gather further data from their citizens and make better decisions. So I'm not going to give you a demo of the app itself during the presentation, but if you want to have a play with it, go to cruiseguide.co.nz. Feel free to go there now on your phones. And you'll find the App Store links and things from there. I won't be offended if you've got your heads down playing with it while I'm talking. And it's really interesting timing. We actually just released version 2 of the app about 3 hours ago, so I'm really interested to hear if there's any bugs or anything like that in it. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Cool. So first I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Marlborough District Council's problems and what they're trying to solve. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the app, what it does, and the APIs it's consuming. And then I'll cover a few things that worked well during the development of this project and a few things that didn't go so well. If we do have any time at the end, we'll try for some questions. Cool. So the Marlborough region has the most coastline of any council in New Zealand. They've got a diverse physical landscape, which ranges from subtropical, subalpine environments, and it accommodates some really unique biodiversity with some of the rarest animals in the world. The Sounds have rich cultural significance for both Maori and Europeans alike. In the last 1,000 years, there's been continuous occupation in this coastal region. And today, the Sounds cater to a really wide range of commercial and recreational activities. The agriculture, aquaculture, forestry and tourism industries use the Sounds to generate significant economic value, while recreators enjoy batch life and fishing and diving and boating and much, much more. Currently, 80% of New Zealand's aquaculture produce comes from the Marlborough Sounds. The aquaculture industry recently presented a plan to grow the industry from approximately $380 million to $1 billion industry by 2025. So while this presents a fantastic economic opportunity for the region, it's also likely to create further challenges in balancing the various viewpoints alongside various environmental concerns. One of the challenges they have in the region, despite having a wealth of, rich environment which provides this wealth of opportunities, the breadth of activities undertaken in the region can lead to quite a lot of conflict, particularly when you have opposing visions for how people would like to use the Sounds. One of the particular challenges MDC have is understanding the recreational uses in the Sounds. And this is partly because a large portion of recreational users in the Sounds don't actually live in Marlborough. They come from places like Canterbury and Wellington to their batches. So the Marlborough District Council has a real challenge communicating with them and getting engagement with them. One book that keeps coming up in Environment Court hearings as evidence of how the bays are being used recreationally is Keith Murray's New Zealand Cruising Guide. So while this book gives some good perspective on how various bays stack up as anchorages for yachts, it doesn't necessarily take into account various recreational user groups. Not to mention that the book was first published in 1979, so the information in there is getting a little tired. So the Marlborough District Council had an idea to develop a mobile app which would become a key resource for boaties in the area. And in turn, the council would be able to gather better information about how the Sounds are being used. So the project itself combines, I think, 25 plus open data sets and APIs. As well as the open data we're using, we've also licensed content from Keith's book. And we've also sent drone crews out to take aerial photography and 3D photos. And so we now have a fantastic library of imagery for the area, which can be used for various marketing purposes and obviously within the app itself. So some of the APIs we're using from the Marlborough District Council, we're consuming all the private and club moorings. That's based on their resource consent data. So if you're looking for a club mooring or want to know whose mooring that is out in the bay, you can see it in there. We've got an API for all their foreshore structures, so that's things like slips and wharves and pontoons. There's data sets for things like special use zones, so that's water ski lanes and the like. We've taken all the council-owned facilities like public toilets and so forth from other APIs, and things like where you can get fresh water from. From the Department of Conservation, we're taking an API which contains all their campground facilities. And from LINS, we've pulled together all the various nautical charts for the area and stitched them all together. They have probably a dozen or so different charts, which we've stitched together into a single tile server. And then we've got this tile server running on the phone so that the whole thing works offline when you're out in the middle of the Sounds with no coverage. And we did a really similar thing with the Topo 50 and Topo 250 charts. So if you're into hiking and things, you've got all that stuff that works offline as well. And we also scraped LINS's tile servers and took all their aerial photos as well. So we've got high resolution aerial photography in there on top of Google Maps and a few other things that work when you're connected. One of the things we've got on there is tide predictions. And we wanted to make sure that this app was going to do things quite differently to every other app out there. So the initial plan that Marlborough said was, well, just grab an API feed from Met Service. But when we looked into it, that wasn't going to give our users a great experience because firstly, we wanted our app to work offline and the Met Service API was going to require a data service to be active. Secondly, we want to be able to predict the tide in more than just a few days out. I think the Met Service goes 10 days out, so it didn't give us much headroom, and if we're trying to take stuff offline again, it wasn't much data we could cache. And third, and more importantly, we wanted to predict the tide at every single bay in the Sounds, not just at Picton, which is what the Met Service API would give us. So we found a data set from LINS, which isn't technically an API, it's actually a spreadsheet, which is updated annually. And we take 4 years of tide predictions from that spreadsheet for the primary ports of Picton, Nelson, Wellington. And then we sourced all the secondary ports and calculated the offsets from those primary ports. So we've now got 28 secondary ports with accurate tide predictions. And then for each of those 28 secondary ports, we've linked them to all the bays in the app. So now you can click on any bay and see with an accuracy of plus or minus 2 minutes, up to 4 years worth of tide predictions, all while being offline. So this is a kind of significantly better experience than we were going to get from just grabbing the Met Service API. Some of the other things in the app, we're pulling from the Harbours office. We've got a daily feed of temporary navigation warnings and any current navigation hazards. So that allows the Harbours office to issue warnings and deploy push notifications directly to app users. We've got a live feed of marine traffic coming into the app, so if you do have a data connection running, you can identify large vessels as well as their course, heading and speed. One of the most popular features are the live webcams we've integrated. This allows people to see the weather conditions at various remote locations, which aids in their trip planning before they leave the wharf. This is actually something that our users requested after the app went live. So the council invested in having these cameras installed out in these remote locations. We've provided a facility for marine users to report incidents to the Harbours office. So users can mark the location of an incident and upload some imagery or video that they've taken of what they've seen and get that back to the Harbour Master so that they can go out and investigate. So there's a bunch more things in the app which I won't talk about, but feel free to dive in there. And I know someone's just looking at their watch there, so I'll speed up. Some of the challenges. Some of the challenges we had building this were around the data. A lot of the data presented to us wasn't really fit for our purpose. So we had to do a lot of manual work around mashing up that data. So in particular, the nautical charts from LINS, these are provided as kind of single charts. And if you're planning on printing them off and taking them with you, it makes sense to provide them as this one-off thing. But we wanted an experience which was like a tile server where they all had to be kind of integrated together and different zoom levels and all sorts of things happening. So if LINS were able to provide that as a end-to-end service for all of New Zealand. It would have made our job significantly easier. We also have this maintenance problem. Every time they update one chart, we have to kind of go and redo the whole lot, and God knows how many other app developers are out there doing the same thing. With their aerial imagery, we actually ended up writing a scraper to scrape their service. It was just easier to go the scraping route than actually use their service, which, yeah. So one of the other frustrations was the tide data being provided in a spreadsheet. We would have loved that to be an API because, again, we can't fully automate the update process with it being in a spreadsheet. The other problem, LINs haven't actually stated their commitment to updating that spreadsheet. So using it in the future remains a little bit of a risk for us. We're not entirely sure if they will keep updating it and for how long. There was some data that was missing. So in particular, there was no service that could give us the names, official or unofficial, of any of the bays. So we had to make our own data set using the help of a GIS analyst and quite a lot of local knowledge. So, and that took considerable time, and we wanted to release that data as open data, but it actually turned out there was quite a bit of contention about what each bay was called. So MDC were a bit fearful they were going to get lots of complaints if we released that data officially. So they've decided to hold it back. We are able to provide it in an unofficial capacity, so we've named the API endpoint fairly logically in the hope that anyone with some technical skills can find it and use it if they want to. One other challenge was dealing with licensing. So obviously some content was licensed from this cruising guide book, and that deal took about 12 months to come through. So the app was developed in late 2015, but we weren't able to actually launch it publicly for another 12 months after that while this thing was held up on the licensing side of things. So open licensing in general saves a lot of time, and thinking about that up front. What went well? Well, aside from, I guess, spending quite a bit of time up in Marlborough on boats and doing user research, what worked exceptionally well in the project was bringing together a really diverse set of stakeholders from different departments in the council, and they all got to collaborate on the design and roadmap for the product. The product owner for the project, or the product owners, in fact, came from the regulatory department, so they're interested in understanding recreational use so they can make better decisions when granting consents and that kind of thing. The MDC's web team provided the initial wireframes, and they now manage a lot of the content within the app, and they were able to provide quite a lot of insights into various users and groups to talk to. The IT department there provided project governance and also some API integration support. We worked a lot with the Harbour Master, who provided a lot of input into the messaging and the types of messaging he needed to get out to his users. And what was interesting is many of the people in our team actually had quite a lot of sailing experience, and experience in particular navigating around the Sounds. So on one hand, that was really useful, but what we actually spotted was a lot of the people who had no experience in this at all kind of kept pulling us back down to earth and stating some really obvious stuff. You know, it's easy to get carried away. I'm a sailor myself. You get carried away with doing the perfect navigation by the book thing. They're like, well, Google Maps just does it like this, and everyone knows how that works. And you're like, oh yeah, that's right. Not everyone knows how to sail. Not everyone knows their port from starboard. So it was really interesting having that very diverse group of people designing the user experience. And also we've had dozens of beta users providing feedback, and we're continuing to get a stream of ideas and praise and criticisms from the public, which is continuing to shape the project. And that's been really, really valuable as well. So just to recap what it's providing, it's a data collection to inform future decision-making within the council. That's its primary function. But it's also increasing public awareness of issues relating to the Sounds. It's a vital communication channel for the Harbour Master's office, and it's become a valuable resource for all the users of the Sounds. So, any questions?